Some betrayals don't come with thunder. They don't come screaming through the door or smashing plates across the kitchen floor. No, some betrayals arrive quietly, like steam rising from a teacup. Silent, invisible, deadly. My name is Ariana Reyes, and this is not just the story of how my father tried to steal everything I built, but how he tried to silence me forever so he could own everything. If you're new here, this is Revenge Repaid, where betrayal meets accountability, and silence is broken with truth. So let me start where it all began. I didn't grow up in wealth. We didn't have a family estate with sprawling gardens or imported chandeliers. What we had was small, cramped, and often suffocating. But my father, Victor Reyes, dreamed big. Not for us. Not for me or my mother. But for himself. From as early as I could remember, he carried two things: a bitterness that the world hadn't given him more, and an obsession with controlling the people who had given him anything. Which meant me. When I was 12, I built my first website. I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor with an old laptop that overheated every 10 minutes, typing out lines of messy HTML while my mother peeked in and smiled softly. She told me I had magic in my hands. My father. He said websites were toys, but when my first little project sold for $200, suddenly his tone changed. Suddenly, I wasn't a daughter. I was an investment. By 24, I had built a startup from nothing but sleepless nights and ramen-fueled mornings. I pitched, I coded, I worked until my eyes blurred. And it worked. Investors came. Numbers climbed. I bought my mother a proper home with light streaming through windows, the kind she had once cut out of magazines and tucked into recipe books as if saving a dream for later. But with every step I took forward, my father's shadow grew longer. He would call in the middle of the night, demanding updates as though I were an employee, not his child. He'd say things like, "You wouldn't have this ambition if it weren't for my blood in your veins." And when I refused to hand him control of my company, his compliments vanished. All that was left was entitlement and rage. It started with shouting, then with slamming doors, then with silence that froze the air between us. But the day I found a note slid under my office door, in his handwriting, with the words, "Don't forget who made you," I realized something. My father didn't see me as his daughter anymore. He saw me as his possession. Still, I never thought he would cross that line. Not until the afternoon I walked into his house, a house I had helped pay for, and he greeted me with a smile too sweet to be real. "Tea?" he asked. A simple word. A father offering kindness. But the way his hands shook as he poured, the way his eyes darted, avoiding mine. Something inside me stiffened. I lifted the cup. Steam curled into my face, and before the liquid ever touched my lips, a sharp bitterness clung to the air. Not the bitterness of tea leaves, but of something else. Something chemical. Something wrong. That was the moment my world cracked. Because in that silence, I understood. My father hadn't just wanted my company. He hadn't just wanted control. He wanted me gone. Gone so that everything I had built could fall into his lap, without resistance. I placed the cup back on the table. Slow. Careful. And I remember my voice didn't sound like my own when I asked, "What did you put in it?" He didn't answer. Just stared. And for the first time I saw no trace of father in his face. Only hunger. Only greed. That day I walked away with my trembling hands. But a new war was burning in my heart. A decision that would rewrite the story he thought he controlled. Because betrayal that deep, betrayal from blood, it doesn't break you. It builds you into something stronger, something sharper. And if he thought poisoning me was going to be the end of my story, he hadn't met the woman I was about to become. So lean in, because this was only the beginning. The tea never touched my lips. But revenge was already brewing. Suspicion has a taste. It lingers bitter even when nothing passes your lips. That night, After my father handed me the cup of tea I never drank, I lay awake with that taste coating my tongue. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if my father wanted me dead. My mother found me at the kitchen table the next morning, staring into cold coffee I hadn't touched. Her eyes searched mine like she was afraid of what she might find. "Ariana," she whispered, "you have to be careful. Your father—" She trailed off, shaking her head, as though even saying it out loud would make the danger more real. "Careful of what?" I asked. Her lips pressed tight, her silence louder than words. Finally, she just said, "He's capable of more than you think." The weight of her voice told me everything. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't my imagination. There was something darker at play. But my own father, he acted as though nothing had happened. When I stopped by his house 2 days later, he greeted me with that same warm smile, the one that looked borrowed from someone else's face. "Ariana," he said smoothly, "I was worried after the other night. You looked pale, overworked, always burning the candle at both ends." I stood in his doorway, my hands clenched at my sides. "Overworked?" I asked. "You think fainting after one sip of tea is just exhaustion?" He chuckled, dismissive. "You've always been dramatic. Your mother fills your head with nonsense. You're imagining things. Gaslighting. That's what it was. Every word designed to make me doubt myself, to question my own senses." When I didn't respond, he gestured toward the kitchen. "Come in. I'll make you another cup. See for yourself there's nothing wrong." The hairs on my neck stood up. "Another cup?" "No." I turned and walked away, his voice following me down the driveway, mocking, smooth, poisonous in its own way. "Ariana, you can't run from your family forever." A week later, he called with an invitation. "We're having a small dinner," he said. "Just family. I want to make things right." Every instinct screamed at me to say no. But suspicion without proof is just paranoia. And I needed proof. So I went. The dining room was dressed in crystal and candlelight, his attempt at sophistication. Relatives filled the chairs, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't seen in years. And at the head of the table, Victor Reyes held court. When I walked in, he raised his glass. "To my brilliant daughter," he announced. "To her success, her fortune, and her future." The table applauded. I smiled tight, forced, because I knew what was coming. Sure enough, when the glasses were being filled, he set one aside separate, different from the others. He poured with extra care, his eyes flicking up to meet mine, as though daring me to notice. He slid it toward me. "Special for you, Ariana," he said. Just like with tea. With fear my chest tightened. Every eye at the table was on me. Refusing would raise suspicion. Drinking might be the end. So I lifted the glass. And I sipped. The burn hit instantly. Not the warm comfort of wine, but something sharp, heavy, unnatural. Within minutes, the room blurred. Candles smeared into streaks of light. Laughter slowed. Voices warped. I excused myself, my legs unsteady beneath me. In the hallway mirror, my reflection swam, skin pale, eyes glassy, a stranger staring back. Behind me, my mother's soft hand touched my shoulder, her face pale with fear. "Ariana," she whispered, "it's happening again." "Again?" I croaked. She nodded in tears pooling. "Your grandfather. Do you remember his spells? The sudden collapses. The doctors confused. He didn't just fade, Ariana. Your father was always there, always pouring his drinks. I begged him to stop, but he didn't." The floor tilted. Her voice fractured, but her words lodged sharp in my chest. This wasn't paranoia. Not a coincidence. My father had done this before, and now he was doing it again. I gripped the bathroom sink, forcing air into my lungs, the dizziness clawing at me like waves pulling me under. Somehow I steadied myself, and in that trembling silence, a new thought surfaced. My father never rushed. He was calculated. If he was willing to poison me at a table full of relatives, it meant he believed no one would suspect him. It meant he'd done it before, and gotten away with it. But not again. I stared at myself in the mirror, sweat slick on my forehead, resolve hardening beneath the fear. If he wanted me gone, then I would turn his game against him. Because there would be another attempt. Of that I was certain. And when it came, I wouldn't be the one drinking. That night, as I lay in bed recovering, one vow pulsed louder than my heartbeat. I would not just survive him. I would expose him. Destroy him. Piece by piece, truth by truth. Victor Reyes thought he was playing a quiet game of inheritance. But what he didn't know was that his daughter had already begun writing his ending. And when the glass was raised again, it wouldn't be my lips it touched. It would be his. Betrayal doesn't end the moment you catch it. No, that's just when the storm begins to form. And storms, real ones, don't come crashing down without warning. First the air thickens. The sky darkens. The birds go silent. You can feel it gathering. And inside me, the storm was ready. I walked out of my father's house that afternoon with trembling hands, my skin still smelling faintly of the poisoned tea I never drank. But with every step away from him, the tremble turned into something steadier, something sharper. Because if he thought his game ended with my silence, he didn't know me at all. For weeks, I played the part he wanted me to play. The dutiful daughter, the ambitious businesswoman who still owed him everything. I answered his calls. I nodded when he criticized my decisions. I even smiled when he implied again and again that my company should have been his. But behind the smile, I was moving pieces. Carefully, quietly, I met with my lawyer. I documented every strange encounter. I wrote down the date, the time, the words he spoke like someone building a case file against a stranger, not a father, because that's what he had become. And in the silence of my apartment at night, I pulled out the notebook where I used to sketch out business ideas. This time, I wasn't drafting a pitch. I was drafting justice. The moment came on a rainy Friday, the kind of night where the city smelled like wet asphalt and regret. I invited him to dinner at my apartment. A small table. 2 plates. Just father and daughter at least. That's what it looked like. When he walked in, his cologne filled the room before his words did. He kissed my cheek. Too rehearsed. Too smooth. And when he saw the wine bottle waiting on the table, his smile curved in satisfaction. Wine was his weakness. What he didn't know was that I'd switched the bottle before he arrived. The one sitting in front of us looked like the one he liked. Same label. Same cork. But it wasn't. This bottle was my mirror. What he had once tried to serve me, I now poured into his glass. We sat. We talked. Or rather, he talked. He spoke about how my company was too young to survive without a stronger hand. He spoke about how investors trusted men with experience, not girls with dreams. And with every word, I leaned closer, nodded. Let him believe I was still under his thumb. I poured the wine. The glass filled. He lifted it without hesitation. And I lifted mine too. Only my glass wasn't wine at all. It was cranberry juice in a crystal disguise. He never noticed, because men like my father never noticed details when they thought they were in control. He drank deep. 1 swallow. 2. His tongue clicked with approval. And then, silence. He stared at the glass. His hand trembled just enough to give him away. And I saw it, the flicker of realization. That this wasn't the same wine. That something in it was wrong. And in that flicker, I saw fear. Real fear. Not the kind he used to control me with, but the kind that comes when the mask cracks and a man realizes his own game is being played against him. I set my glass down slowly. My voice is calm, steady. Funny thing about poisoned drinks, isn't it? I said. His eyes found mine, wide and trembling. And for the first time, I wasn't his prey. He was mine. I leaned in, my hands folded neatly on the table. You taught me something, Dad. That trust can kill. That even blood isn't safe when greed rots it. But you forgot something. I tapped my notebook, sitting right there beside my plate. I write everything down, his face drained. Because he knew. He knew that whatever was in his glass wasn't half as dangerous as the proof I'd been collecting against him. I let the silence stretch until it ached. Then I spoke again. You can keep drinking. Or you can sign. From under the table, I slid a document across to him. It was the paperwork I'd spent weeks preparing, transferring every claim he had on my company, every loan he swore I owed him, every fabricated right he tried to assert back to me. Legally, permanently, his lips parted, maybe to protest, maybe to curse. But the glass in his hand kept him silent, and his pen my pen scratched across the page in shaky strokes. When it was done, I took the paper, folded it, slipped it into the pocket of my blazer, and I smiled. Not sweet, not kind, but the kind of smile a storm wears when the first bolt of lightning finally strikes. That night, I didn't poison my father. I didn't need to, because the truth is, he was already poisoned. By greed, by envy, by the hunger to control what he could never build himself. All I did was hold up the mirror and let him taste his own reflection. But here's the thing. That night wasn't the end. It was only the eye of the storm. Because storms don't disappear after the first strike. They circle. They build. They come back stronger. And as I stood at the window, watching him stumble out into the rain with his pride shattered and his power stripped away, I knew something. This war was never finished for him. But I wasn't finished either. Because revenge doesn't stop at survival. It doesn't stop when the papers are signed or when the glass is set down. Revenge demands more. It demands an ending. And I was ready to write it. Some storms pass quietly. Others circle back. Louder, darker, more violent than before. After that dinner the night, I swapped the poisoned glass with my father's eye. Knew one thing for certain. Victor Reyes wasn't finished. A man like him doesn't surrender when cornered. He calculates. He waits. He sharpens his blade in the dark. I woke up every morning half expecting retaliation. And sure enough, it came. It started with whispers. Investors I'd worked with for years began to call me hesitantly. Isabella, we're hearing things. Are you all right? Articles surfaced, online rumors of mismanagement, claims I was mentally unstable, unfit to lead my company. Someone had even fabricated medical documents suggesting I had been hospitalized for nervous breakdowns. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. It had my father's fingerprints all over it. He wanted to paint me as fragile, unstable, unreliable, so that when he finally made his move, the world would already believe him. The man had nearly killed me with a poisoned drink, and when that failed, he decided to poison my reputation instead. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once you've been burned by it, you stop waiting for lightning to strike. You build your own storm shelter. Long before Victor launched his smear campaign, I had begun documenting everything. The phone calls, the threats, the financial advice that sounded more like extortion. Even the cup of poisoned tea I never drank, I had preserved the residue, sealed, stored, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his reckoning. And while he played his games in the shadows, I built a case in the light. The stage was set on the day of the annual Tech Investors Gala, a glittering event where founders and backers gathered in one opulent ballroom, drinking champagne under chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. I arrived in a simple black dress, nothing flashy. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to end it. Victor was already working the room. I saw him from across the hall, laughing too loudly, shaking hands, leaning in to whisper conspiracies about me to anyone who'd listen. He wore the mask of a charming patriarch, but I knew the monster behind it. Halfway through the evening, he took the stage. His voice boomed through the microphone as he introduced himself as the man behind the vision of Reyes Innovations. My vision, my company, my blood, my sweat, my sacrifice. I felt rage coil inside me like a serpent, but I stayed still, because this wasn't about rage anymore. This was about the truth, and I had come armed with it. When Victor finished his speech, the applause was hesitant, scattered. Some investors looked at him with unease. His charm was cracking. That was my cue. I stepped forward, heels clicking against the polished floor, and asked for the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady though my heart hammered in my chest. "You've just heard my father's story. Now it's time you hear mine." The room stilled. All eyes turned. Victor's smile froze, then thinned into something sharp. I unwrapped the lies until nothing was left hidden. The poisoned tea, the night of the swapped wine glass, the whispers, the threats, the smear campaign. And then I produced the evidence. From my bag, I drew out the sealed lab report, proving the wine Victor had meant for me contained barbiturates. Screens flashed as I projected the results onto a nearby monitor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This is not the story of an unstable daughter," I said. "This is the story of a father who would rather bury his child than see her succeed without him." Victor tried to laugh it off. "She's delusional," he barked, "making up fairy tales because she can't handle real leadership." But the investors weren't laughing. Neither were the detectives I had quietly invited, standing at the back of the hall. One of them stepped forward. "Victor Reyes, you're under arrest for attempted murder." The ballroom erupted in murmurs, cameras flashing as officers clasped handcuffs around his wrists. For a moment his mask slipped entirely. His face twisted not with fear, but with naked hatred. "You think this ends me, Isabella?" He spat as they dragged him toward the doors. "You are nothing without me." But his words bounced off me like stones against steel. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I was free. The weeks that followed were grueling. Courtrooms are their own kind of battlefield, sterile, cold, buzzing with fluorescent lights and murmured objections. I sat through testimony after testimony. Experts confirmed the poison. Detectives revealed his financial motives. Even my mother testified, voice shaking, as she admitted she'd long suspected Victor's hand in her own father's mysterious death years ago. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And when the jury returned, with a guilty verdict on attempted murder of me and first-degree murder of my grandfather, the weight that left my chest was so heavy, I nearly collapsed. The judge's words rang like a bell of finality. Victor Reyes' life in prison without parole. People often ask me if I felt joy, relief, vindication. But the truth, what I felt was grief. Not for the man sentenced, but for the father I had once believed. The one who had taught me to ride a bike, who clapped at my first school play, who kissed my forehead when I had fevers. That man was gone long before the handcuffs clicked shut. He'd been replaced by greed, by envy, by the black hunger for control. I grieved for the father I wished he had been, even as I walked away from the man he was. Revenge isn't sweet. It isn't a neat ribbon tied around justice. It's messy. It's bloody. It leaves scars you don't see until years later. And sometimes there's no other choice, because silence lets monsters grow. And speaking the truth, dragging them into the light, is the only way to cut them down. My name is Ariana Reyes. I was poisoned by my own father. But I lived. And he will die behind bars. That is my revenge. That is my repayment. And if my story struck a chord with you, if you believe betrayal should never go unanswered, subscribe to Revenge Repaid. Every day I bring you a new story where silence is broken, truth is unveiled, and justice is more than a word. Because here, betrayal always meets its ending. This was my ending. And maybe, it's just the beginning of yours.